When God prepares you for greatness, it is never without a cost. In the same way that a diamond is formed under intense pressure, so too is your character shaped through trials. Understand this truth: the path to your destiny will not be easy. There will be moments when it feels like everything is falling apart, but remember, it is not destruction, it is divine preparation. Think of the Israelites as they wandered in the desert. What seemed like a curse was actually a purification process. They had to go through hardship before they could enter the promised land. It was not the wilderness itself that held them back, but their own minds, their own fears, their own pride. And just like them, we often fight the very thing that God is using to mold us. The refining fire, the storm, the waiting, these are not signs that God has abandoned you. They are signs that He is refining you, preparing you, shaping you for what's to come. Divine preparation is rarely a smooth or painless journey. It requires a level of sacrifice, endurance, and faith that many people are unwilling to embrace. However, just as diamonds are formed under intense pressure, the same principle applies to the human spirit. It is through the struggles, challenges, and tests of life that we are shaped into who we are meant to be. When God prepares you for something greater, it will often hurt, and it will often feel like a battle, but that is where your strength and potential are forged. Imagine for a moment the natural process that creates a diamond. Deep within the earth, carbon is subjected to extreme heat and pressure over millions of years. The process is harsh, intense, and relentless. The carbon undergoes transformation, changing into a precious stone that shines with unparalleled brilliance. However, before it reaches its final form, it must endure a crushing process that separates the impurities and exposes the raw potential. It would be easy to look at the diamond in its raw state and see only a rough, unpolished rock, but what lies within that rough exterior is extraordinary potential waiting to be revealed. This analogy mirrors our own spiritual journey. We may begin with an idea of who we want to be or what we want to achieve, but in order to truly manifest that purpose, we must be refined and purified. This process of refining, much like the diamond's formation, requires us to face challenges that feel like tests of endurance and resolve. These challenges may come in many forms: emotional, physical, financial, relational, and often the pressure can feel unbearable. We may question whether we are truly being prepared or if we are simply being crushed under the weight of circumstances. It is important to remember that God's preparation is not a random occurrence, it is intentional and purposeful. Just as a craftsman carefully shapes a piece of raw material into a work of art, God is meticulously shaping you for the calling He has placed on your life. But this shaping process often requires discomfort. We cannot become who we are meant to be without going through the trials that strip away the layers of doubt, fear, and self-limiting beliefs that hold us back. The pain you experience is part of God's design to prepare you for greater things. When God begins this refining process in your life, it may feel like your world is falling apart. You might experience loss, disappointment, or confusion. You might wonder why God is allowing you to face such hardships, especially when you feel you've been faithful and have done everything right. But it is in these moments of trial that God is doing His deepest work. He is testing your faith, strengthening your resolve, and preparing your heart to receive the blessings He has in store for you. In times of pressure, we often discover what we are truly made of. It's easy to have faith when everything is going well, when the road is smooth, and when success comes easily. But true character is revealed when we are tested. It is in the storm that we find our strength and resilience, and it is in those moments of pain that we begin to realize how much more we are capable of than we ever imagined. God doesn't just want to bless you with external rewards. He wants to transform you from the inside out, and that transformation often comes through discomfort. Just like the diamond, we have to go through the fire to reveal our true value. We may feel like we are being broken, but in reality, we are being made. We are being refined, reshaped, and prepared for the next level of our journey. The very pressure that we feel is a sign that we are becoming something greater, something more precious in God's eyes. It is a reminder that we are being prepared for the good work that God has called us to do, and that work requires a foundation that is unshakable, a spirit that is steadfast, and a heart that is humble. In many ways, this process is not just about what we will achieve, but who we will become. It is about developing the strength to endure, the wisdom to understand, and the humility to serve. It is through this divine preparation that we are equipped to carry the blessings and responsibilities that God has set aside for us. Without this refining, we would not be ready to handle the weight of those blessings, and we would miss out on the fullness of the life God has destined for us. As you face your own trials and challenges, remember this: the pain is not in vain. It is a necessary part of the process. Just as the diamond does not appear beautiful until it has endured the pressure, you will not fully realize your potential until you have gone through the fire. The process may hurt, but it is a sign that God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. Trust in His timing, trust in His process, and trust that He is shaping you into a masterpiece. When you are walking through hardships, all abandoned will feel abandoned. It's human to wonder why God is allowing certain things to happen, especially when you've been faithful, when you've done everything right, and yet life seems to be crumbling around you. In these moments, it's easy to question His presence or His plan, but the truth is, the challenges you face are not a sign of God's abandonment. They are part of a divine process of preparation. God does not leave us in the wilderness. He walks with us through it, refining us for what lies ahead. Take the example of the Israelites as they journeyed through the wilderness. God had delivered them from slavery in Egypt with miraculous signs and wonders, but after their liberation, they found themselves in the desert, a barren place, a place of scarcity and struggle. For 40 years, they wandered in a land that seemed to offer them nothing but hardship. But in this wilderness, God was not absent. He was very present, using the desert as a training ground to shape them into the people they were meant to be. Their journey wasn't an easy one. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and even rebellion. The Israelites were hungry and thirsty, and they grumbled against Moses, questioning why they were led out of Egypt just to die in the wilderness. But what they failed to see was that the wilderness was not their destination, it was their preparation. In the desert, they learned to depend on God in ways they had never done before. They saw His provision every day, with manna falling from the sky and water flowing from rocks. Yet they still struggled to trust Him fully. Their hearts had been hardened by years of oppression, and it was only through the challenges of the wilderness that God was able to refine them, purify their hearts, and prepare them for the land of promise. It's easy for us to focus on the struggles and the discomfort when we face our own wilderness seasons. We want to escape the pain, avoid the difficulty, and move on to something easier. But often, the greatest spiritual growth happens in these very moments. When you are facing a challenge that seems insurmountable, it's easy to feel like God has left you, but in reality, He is very present, actively working in your life, even when you don't understand how. Just like the Israelites, God may be using your wilderness season to purify you, to teach you patience, to help you trust in His timing, and to prepare you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. God's presence in the wilderness is not always obvious. Sometimes it's a quiet whisper, a gentle guidance in your spirit, a subtle assurance that He is with you even when you don't feel it. We may be tempted to think that if God were truly with us, we would not have to endure such hardships. But the reality is, the hardships are part of His plan to prepare us for the future. The same God who walked with the Israelites in the wilderness is the same God who walks with us today. He is near to us in our times of struggle, even when we don't see it. He uses our pain to build our character, to strengthen our faith, and to increase our reliance on Him. We often look at the difficulty of our situation and question why God is allowing it. We may ask, why me? Why now? What is the purpose of all this? But if we could see from God's perspective, we would realize that these moments are not meant to break us, they are meant to make us. God is preparing us for something greater, something beyond what we can understand in the moment. The wilderness is a refining fire, purging the impurities from our hearts and minds. It's in the hardest times that we learn who we truly are, what we truly believe, and what we are truly made of. The pain we experience in these seasons is often a necessary part of the transformation process. When God allows us to go through hardship, He is not punishing us, He is purifying us. Just as gold is purified in a furnace, our hearts are refined in the fire of adversity. The things that seem to cause us the most pain are the very things that God uses to shape us into His image. He is not absent in these moments. He is actively working, guiding, and directing us through the wilderness. It's also important to remember that God's plans are not always aligned with our timing. We may think that we should have reached the promised land by now, that we should be in a season of blessing and success. But God's timing is perfect. The wilderness is a place of preparation, not punishment, and it is during these seasons that God is doing a deep work within us that will ultimately lead us to the blessings He has promised. So when you feel lost in the wilderness, when you feel abandoned, remember that God is right there with you. He is using this season to prepare you for what's next. The struggle may feel endless, but it is not in vain. God's presence in the wilderness is a promise He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He is using every moment of your struggle to prepare you for the greater things He has in store. Trust that He is with you, even when you can't see it. Trust that the wilderness will lead you to the promised land. The pain that accompanies our trials often leads us to a crucial realization. It's not only the external circumstances that shape us, but the transformation that happens on the inside. The challenges we face, the disappointments, the losses, the struggles are not simply obstacles meant to derail us. They are the very tools God uses to refine and strengthen us, to build character and resilience in a way that success alone could never achieve. When we find ourselves in the midst of hardship, we often focus on the external pain. But the real work happening in those moments is internal. It's shaping who we are, molding us into the person we are destined to become. When you go through a difficult season, it's easy to look around and compare your struggles to others. It's natural to ask, why does it feel like everyone else is moving forward while I seem to be stuck in this painful place? Yet it's in these moments of trial that God is preparing you for what lies ahead. Success without preparation is hollow and fleeting. Without the internal growth and character development that hardship brings, we cannot handle the weight of the blessings and responsibilities that success entails. This internal growth is what God cares about most. It's not just about the gifts we have, it's about who we are on the inside and how we handle those gifts. I think of the story of Joseph in the Bible. His journey to greatness was not one of ease. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. Yet through all of this, Joseph's character was being shaped. Each painful experience, each trial, was not a setback, but a step toward His divine purpose. God wasn't just preparing Joseph for a position of power, He was preparing him to carry the weight of that power with humility, wisdom, and grace. Joseph had the gifts of leadership and vision, but it was through the fire of adversity that his character was refined so he could fulfill his destiny without being destroyed by it. We may look at the gifts we have, our talents, our potential, and wonder why they haven't yet brought us the success we believe we deserve. But what we often fail to realize is that if those gifts were released too early, without the necessary character to support them, they would likely lead to our downfall. Without the lessons learned in the desert, the failures and the disappointments, we would not have the humility, patience, and wisdom to navigate the success that God intends for us. It's in the struggle that we gain the strength to endure, the wisdom to make good decisions, and the emotional maturity to handle both the blessings and the burdens of success. Character is built in the quiet moments, in the days of waiting, in the nights of uncertainty. It is not formed when things are easy, but when we are faced with the choice to persevere, to trust, and to hold on to our faith despite the circumstances. It is in these moments that our hearts are tested and we discover the true depth of our faith. Do we trust God only when things go our way, or do we trust Him in the hard times too? Do we seek His will when it's comfortable, or do we submit to His plan even when it feels difficult? The trials we face refine us in ways we cannot always see in the moment. It's only when we look back, when we are on the other side of the hardship, that we can begin to understand how much we've grown. We realize that the pain was not pointless, it was purposeful. The emotional scars we carry, the lessons learned through hardship, are not signs of weakness but of strength. They are the marks of a person who has endured, who has grown through the pain, and who has emerged stronger on the other side. When you're in the midst of a trial, it can be hard to see the bigger picture. The pain is overwhelming and it feels like it will never end. But understand that God is using this season to build something inside of you that can't be built through ease or comfort. He is shaping your character in ways that will sustain you long after the trial is over. The person you become through hardship is the person who will be able to handle the blessings that God is preparing for you. The internal transformation is what prepares you to steward success with integrity, wisdom, and grace. It is not the outward circumstances that determine our success, but the internal transformation that comes from walking through the fire. It is the strength of our character, the depth of our faith, and the maturity of our heart that enable us to handle the challenges and blessings that life brings. God uses the pain to develop something in us that success alone could never do. He builds a foundation that is unshakable, a heart that is resilient, and a spirit that is prepared for all that lies ahead. So, when you face difficulties, don't view them as setbacks, but as part of God's divine plan to make you into the person you are meant to be. The growth happening within you is far more important than anything happening on the outside. Through it all, God is preparing you for something greater. When we face trials, the human instinct is often to seek relief or escape from the discomfort. It is tempting to resist the pain and ask, why me or why now? We may long for the situation to change quickly, but the truth is that there is often a greater purpose in our suffering than we initially realize. God's ways are not our ways, and His timeline is different from ours. He doesn't work on our schedule or according to our limited understanding. Instead, He has a broader perspective that we can't always see. This is why God's preparation often involves waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, and the right timing. Waiting is part of His divine plan, and in the process, He is shaping us into who we need to be to fulfill the purpose He has set before us. In times of waiting, it's easy to become frustrated or impatient. We see others moving forward, achieving success, and we wonder why we are stuck in a holding pattern. But this is where faith plays a crucial role. When we trust God, even in the midst of waiting, we acknowledge that He knows what is best for us. We surrender our timing to Him, trusting that He is working behind the scenes to prepare us for what's ahead. There are moments when we may feel like we're being left behind, but in reality, we are exactly where God wants us to be. The waiting is not a sign of being forgotten or abandoned. It's a season of preparation, a time to grow and mature before stepping into what God has for us. One of the most difficult aspects of waiting is the feeling of being stuck. When we wait without seeing any visible progress, it can be disheartening. We may feel like we're not moving forward or that nothing is changing, but God uses these moments to build patience and endurance in us. The process of waiting is not idle, it is active. It's in the way that God is often refining us, purging us of our impatience and teaching us to trust in His perfect timing. We are often too quick to rush ahead and make decisions on our own, but waiting forces us to slow down and listen to God's voice. In the stillness, we become more attuned to His will, and it is in this quiet waiting that He can speak to us in ways that we may not hear during times of activity. Think of the story of David in the Bible. David was anointed as king while he was still a young shepherd, but he didn't immediately step into his role as king. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness running from King Saul, facing rejection and enduring hardship. During this time, David could have easily become resentful or bitter, questioning God's plan. He could have taken matters into his own hands and tried to force his way into kingship. Yet, through these years of waiting, God was shaping David's character, teaching him to rely on Him and preparing him for the challenges that kingship would bring. David's time in the wilderness was a time of preparation, not punishment. It was a time when God was refining his heart and his leadership skills so that when the time came for him to take the throne, he would be ready. Like David, we may find ourselves in seasons of waiting that feel long and uncertain. We may not understand why things are taking longer than we expected or why we are being held back from what we think we are meant to do. But God's timing is never wrong. He is never late. While we are waiting, He is working in ways we cannot see, preparing us for the next phase of our journey. The waiting doesn't mean we are being forgotten. It means we are being prepared. Every day of waiting is a day that God is molding us, shaping our character and developing qualities in us that will help us handle the blessings He is preparing to give us. It's important to remember that the waiting period is not wasted. We may feel like we're in a holding pattern, but God is using this time to equip us with everything we need to succeed in what's ahead. The patience we develop during the waiting will be essential for the journey that follows. The waiting teaches us to trust in God's timing, even when it doesn't match our own. It's during these times that we learn to lean not on our own understanding, but on God's wisdom, which is far greater than our own. Our faith grows stronger as we wait with hope and expectation, trusting that God's plan is unfolding in His perfect timing. So when you find yourself in a season of waiting, remember that it is not in vain. God is at work. The waiting period is part of His preparation for what's ahead. Though it may feel uncomfortable, it is shaping you into the person you need to be to step into the next chapter of your life. Trust that God knows what He is doing. Trust that His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with your own. In the waiting, God is working, and He is preparing you for the future He has promised. It's easy to focus on the things that we can see, the tangible outcomes, the accomplishments, and the successes. These external markers often define our sense of progress, but God's preparation works on a deeper level. It's not always the visible achievements that signify growth. Instead, it's the unseen, internal changes that are often the most important. When God is preparing us, He is not only shaping our circumstances, but He is also refining our hearts, molding us into the person we need to be for the next chapter of our lives. This process can be uncomfortable because it requires us to confront the things within us that need to be transformed. God's preparation often involves a kind of spiritual surgery. He cuts away the parts of us that are not in alignment with His will. This can feel painful. It may seem like certain desires, dreams, or even relationships are being stripped away, and we wonder why we are experiencing such loss. But the truth is, these are the very things that would have hindered us from stepping into the fullness of what God has planned for us. When He prepares us, He often removes the things that are holding us back, even if they are things we've grown attached to or have become comfortable with. The pain we experience in this process is not because God is punishing us, but because He loves us and wants the best for us. Just like a gardener prunes a tree to allow it to bear more fruit, God prunes our lives to enable us to bear the fruit He has designed for us. Sometimes we hold on tightly to things, relationships, or habits that we believe are good for us, but God knows better. He sees what lies ahead and understands the bigger picture even when we don't. We might cling to our comfort zones, thinking that they are the safest place to be, but God knows that true growth comes when we are willing to let go of the familiar and embrace the unknown. This process can feel like a loss, but in reality, it is God's way of creating space in our lives for something far greater. The things we lose may be things we don't fully understand, but God is always replacing them with something better, something more in alignment with His divine purpose for us. This is a crucial aspect of God's preparation. He doesn't just shape our external world, He shapes us from the inside out. He works on our hearts, on our desires, on our attitudes, and on our perspectives. The external changes that we desire cannot happen unless we first undergo the internal transformation that God is working in us. It's easy to get caught up in the external, wanting the job, the house, the relationship, or the success, but God is more concerned with who we are becoming. Our character, our integrity, our faith, these are the things that matter most to Him. And for these things to grow, they must be tested, challenged, and refined. When God prepares us, He allows us to experience difficulties that force us to grow in ways we didn't expect. These challenges push us out of our comfort zones and require us to rely on Him more fully. They reveal areas of weakness and places where we need to build strength. But instead of avoiding these struggles, we must embrace them as opportunities for growth. They are not roadblocks, they are stepping stones that take us closer to the person we need to be. The process of God preparing us may not always make sense in the moment. But if we trust in His wisdom and love, we can rest assured that He is doing something beautiful in us. God's preparation also involves refining our purpose. Many times we may feel a sense of confusion about where we are headed or what we are supposed to be doing. We may know that we are meant for something greater, but struggle to identify exactly what that is. In these seasons of uncertainty, God is not idle. He is clarifying our purpose, guiding us, and helping us discover the calling that He has placed on our lives. This process of discovery is often not immediate. It takes time, and it requires us to be patient and open to His direction. The more we trust Him, the clearer our path will become. The preparation that God does within us is often a slow and steady work. It's not a quick fix or an instant transformation. We may wish that we could skip the painful parts or that we could fast forward to the end result. But God's preparation is a process that takes time. And this time is essential. If we rush through it, we risk missing the valuable lessons He wants to teach us along the way. God is working in us even when we don't see the results immediately. The changes he is making in our hearts, our minds, and our spirits are often subtle but profound. As we continue to walk with him, we begin to see that the things we once struggled with no longer hold the same power over us. The areas of weakness begin to transform into areas of strength, and our faith grows deeper. So while God's preparation may feel uncomfortable, it is not without purpose. The discomfort we experience is the result of growth, and every step of the process is leading us closer to the person he created us to be. His preparation involves removing the things that no longer serve us, shaping our hearts, and aligning our lives with his perfect will. It may feel painful in the moment, but in hindsight, we will see that God was doing something beautiful and necessary. When we embrace his process, we open ourselves to the fullness of his plans, and we can trust that he will lead us to a future far greater than we could have imagined. When we talk about God's preparation, we often focus on the visible or tangible aspects, how our circumstances change, how our abilities develop, or how our external circumstances shift. However, there is a deeper spiritual preparation that is often the most significant. This preparation doesn't always involve clear external changes, but it is perhaps the most crucial element of the process. It is the spiritual growth that happens within us during times of adversity, and it is what equips us for the future God has planned. This growth isn't always easy, but it is necessary. The truth is that God uses pain, discomfort, and hardship to develop a deeper relationship with us, one that goes beyond surface-level faith and brings us into a deeper understanding of his love, power, and purpose. When we face trials and hardship, it can feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. It's easy to become overwhelmed by the pain, confusion, or difficulty we experience. During these moments, we may even question whether God is present or whether he truly cares about our struggles. But the reality is that God is deeply involved in the process of preparing us, even when we cannot see his hand at work. It is in these moments of difficulty that God calls us to draw near to him, to trust him in ways we may never have done before, and to deepen our relationship with him. These moments challenge us to rely on God not just for solutions, but for a stronger connection with him that transcends our circumstances. The process of spiritual preparation often involves a stripping away of things that we have leaned on for comfort, security, and identity. We may find that things we once relied on, our achievements, our relationships, our possessions, or even our own abilities, are no longer enough to carry us through the challenges we face. This stripping process can be painful. It's a humbling experience as we realize that the things we thought would give us security can't provide the lasting peace and fulfillment we crave. But in these moments, God invites us to depend on him in a way we never have before. He becomes our source of strength, hope, and guidance. This is the spiritual growth that takes place when we let go of self-reliance and learn to trust in him fully. As God prepares us spiritually, he often leads us into periods of solitude or silence. These times can feel isolating, and we may wonder why God seems distant. But in reality, these moments are opportunities for God to work in us in ways that are not possible when we are distracted by the noise of everyday life. It is during these quiet moments that God speaks the clearest. He reveals parts of our hearts that need healing, areas of our lives where we need to grow, and new aspects of his character that we may not have understood before. The silence is not punishment, but preparation. It's in the stillness that we learn to hear his voice more clearly, to discern his will more accurately, and to embrace his presence more fully. Spiritual preparation also involves a deepening of our faith. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, but it is in the difficult times that our faith is truly tested. God uses hardship to refine our faith, to take it from being a shallow belief to a deep, unshakable trust. This is not a faith that crumbles at the first sign of difficulty, but a faith that is rooted deeply in the understanding that God is good, faithful, and sovereign, no matter what we face. The process of refining our faith is not easy, but it is necessary. It teaches us to trust God even when we don't understand his plan, to rely on even when we can't see the way forward, and to hold on to his promises even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Another aspect of spiritual preparation is the development of godly character. As we walk through life, we encounter situations that reveal areas where our character needs growth. Whether it's learning patience, humility, forgiveness, or compassion, God uses these trials to mold us into the people He wants us to be. Sometimes we may resist this process, wishing that we could bypass the difficult lessons and avoid the pain. But without these lessons, we would not be equipped to handle the challenges ahead. God uses trials to build the character traits that will sustain us in the future. These qualities, humility, integrity, perseverance, and compassion, are essential for fulfilling the purpose He has for us. Without these character traits, we may find success, but we would lack the depth and stability to maintain it or use it in a way that brings glory to God. One of the most profound aspects of spiritual preparation is the development of a deeper sense of purpose. As we go through the trials, God reveals to us more about who we are in Him and what He has called us to do. It is often through adversity that we gain clarity on our purpose. We discover more about the gifts and talents God has given us, and we come to understand how He wants to use them for His glory. This deeper sense of purpose guides us through the difficult times, reminding us that our struggles are not in vain. They are part of God's plan to prepare us for the future He has set before us. When we see our pain in light of the purpose God has for our lives, we are better able to endure it with hope and perseverance. God's spiritual preparation is not always easy, and it often involves moments of deep personal struggle. But in the midst of this preparation, He is drawing us closer to Himself, deepening our faith and building the character that will carry us into the future He has planned for us. Every challenge we face, every moment of uncertainty, and every struggle is part of this divine process. God is preparing us spiritually to step into the fullness of our calling, and though the process may be difficult, it is always purposeful. Through it all, He is faithful to shape us into the people we need to be to fulfill His plans for our lives.